Now that we have a better understanding of object transformation, let's start animating. We will work on the classic bouncing ball. Since I'd like to be able to squash and stretch the ball during the animation, using its very center as a pivot point is not ideal. What I'd like to do instead is having its origin point on the base of the ball, as this is going to be the contacting point of the ball with our imaginary ground. So I will simply enter edit mode, select every vertices and press G, Z and 1 to move everything of 1 meter on the Z-axis. When I get back into object mode, I still have the same sphere, but its origin is now on its base. By default, the timeline in Blender is in the bottom of the screen. When you press space, you can see that we are playing an animation, meaning that Blender is going through the different frame of the document. The playhead in the timeline indicates which frame you are currently reading. We can change the length of the animation by setting the end frame and the beginning frame. I will set the beginning frame to 0 and the end frame to 24. When I press play, we can see the playhead moving till frame 24 and getting back to frame 0. This value indicates you the current frame that is also a light on top of the playhead. Animation in Blender is basically recording a different transformation to an object in time, meaning that we can record location, rotation or scale of an object on different frames. To insert a keyframe, we simply need to have our object selected in space and press the I key. A menu will pop up asking you which kind of keyframe you want to write. Basically, do you want to record the location, the rotation, the scale of the object, or a combination of those? When I select location, we can see that in the transform channel of my object, the location input turned to yellow. And on the timeline, I get a little yellow indicator that tells me we have recorded a keyframe. A keyframe is a simple registered value in time. In our case, we have registered or recorded the location of our object on frame 0. I will place the playhead on frame 10 and move my object a little higher and insert a location keyframe. Now I can see a new keyframe on my timeline, and as soon as I move the playhead from left to right, I can see the sphere moving from its previous position on frame 0 to the next position we have keyframed on frame 10. We have recorded 2 positions on 2 different frames, and what we are seeing now is Blender interpolating or creating an interpolation between those 2 positions in space. Keyframes can be manipulated in the timeline as objects, so you can move them using G, you can press Shift D to duplicate them, you can box select them, press X to delete them, you can insert a new keyframe by simply hovering over a transform channel and pressing I, or right-clicking and choose between Insert Keyframe or Insert Single Keyframe if you just want to add a keyframe on the X location, for example. Right-clicking will also allow you to delete all the keyframes from the selected channel, or choose Delete Only Single Keyframe to delete a specific X, Y, or Z channel. So let's start our exercise on frame 0 and insert a keyframe. Let's move the playhead to frame 12 and then move our sphere or ball on the Z-axis by 8 meters. We can see that our transform channels have changed color. The X and Y has turned green, meaning that they have been keyframed previously and their values hasn't changed. And the Z keyframe has turned to orange, meaning that we have transformed the Z value, but it's not recorded yet. And this is a big warning, because as soon as I will move the playhead, my ball will return to its first keyframe position, meaning that I have lost the Z transformation I've performed on frame 12 because I haven't recorded it. So I will jump back to frame 12, move my sphere of 8 meters, and then press I to insert a keyframe. If I now scrub through frame 0 to frame 12, I can see the ball rising in the air. The transform channels are colored in yellow whenever I'm hitting a keyframe, and they are green whenever I'm in between or during an interpolation. I can select the first keyframe, press Shift D and move it onto the very last frame so that I have a looping action. To create a loop, you just have to make your first and last keyframes being the same. You can move from frame to frame by pressing the left and right arrow. Whenever you will press the up and down arrow, you will jump from the previous to the next keyframe. Pressing Shift right and Shift left will bring you to the very last or very first keyframe. You can perform all those playhead manipulation using the UI in the header of the timeline. As we have seen before, anytime we are moving our object somewhere, we need to insert a keyframe or we will lose the manipulation we have done. While it might be okay to press I each time we perform a manipulation on a single bouncing ball, when you will start animating a full character with thousands of controls, that's gonna be very tedious. Fortunately, there is the record button here that allow us to auto key any transformation. As soon as I move the sphere, you can see that new keys are being recorded for every channel of the sphere automatically. Note that whenever you are using this option and moving your object in space, you are warned that there is an auto keying going on the top right corner of your 3D view. As explained in the beginning, we can keyframe mostly every kind of value in Blender, and it can be a color. If I select the material preview of my sphere and I click this little rounded icon, it will add a keyframe on the color value, and I can find this keyframe on the timeline. If I go a little further now and change the color, since the auto keying is on, it will insert a new keyframe of this new color. And whenever I scrub through the timeline, I can see the color interpolation of the sphere. To summarize, we have seen that we can use the timeline to navigate through the different frames. We have seen that we can create a keyframe by recording any value, whether it's a transform channel, a color, or whatever we want, onto a specific frame. Blender will automatically create an interpolation between two keyframes. Keyframe values appeared in yellow, animated values appear in green, and recording value changes are shown in orange, and gray value are just unanimated values.